Well, happy Super Tuesday to you. 506 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. I have been fascinated by all of the courtroom developments going on in Fulton County, Georgia. That's where Democrats thought they were going to convict Donald Trump for trying to overthrow the election in 2020. But instead, what do they say on The Office? How the turntables have turned as things have changed down there. Fani Willis now being scrutinized for her corruption, taking cash from the taxpayers, sleeping with her coworkers, hiring the people that she's been sleeping with. It's all a big disaster, and it just keeps getting worse for her. Ed Morrissey joins us now. He's a managing editor over at Hot Air and the host of the Ed Morrissey Show podcast as well. Sir, always nice to talk to you.
Oh, it's great to be with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it is. I mean, it has been such great courtroom drama. I've enjoyed watching all of it. And during this, you've had some primary characters. You've got Fani Willis, of course, the Attorney General in Fulton County. You've got Nathan Wade, who is the attorney who's never prosecuted a felony in his life that she hired to do that very job against Donald Trump. And it turns out it's very likely she was sleeping with him for a long time. And you've also got Terrence Bradley. This is the former law partner of Nathan Wade, who for a time, according to some text messages, was willing to tell all sorts of people that Nathan Wade was engaged in a long-term relationship with Fani Willis. But then on the stand, he suddenly had a pretty convenient case of amnesia. What's going on now, Ed?
Well, what's going on right now is that that case of amnesia has prompted at least two people to come forward to say, no. Terrence Bradley was telling me about these relationships. At the same time, he was texting Ashley Merchant about it. He wasn't at all unclear about the nature of the relationship. One of those, though, is, I think, a little bit more important. And let me just preface it by saying this. Technically speaking, what these witnesses are attesting to would be hearsay, but they're not actually attesting to the affair itself. They're attesting to what Terrence Bradley shared with them about his own personal knowledge of it as a rebuttal to his claim that he didn't have any personal knowledge. And that's the reason why this would probably be allowed as testimony in the hearing. But the one of the witnesses, her name is Cindi Lee Yeager. She is actually a current deputy DA in Cobb County, which is right nearby Fulton County. And she not only is going to testify to that, but she's also going to testify that she was actually in the room when Terrence Bradley was talking to Fani Willis and heard Fani Willis tell Terrence Bradley not to talk to investigators about their relationship, which is witness tampering. And that's a very, very bad idea. You're a prosecutor, and you're trying to prosecute a corruption case. It looks very, very dodgy.
So these witnesses were coming forward. To your point, they're basically saying that Terrence Bradley perjured himself on the stand. They heard him say one thing, and he said something completely different on the stand. That seems like pretty relevant testimony.
It does seem like very relevant testimony to me. And what I would say is that again, this is just about a disqualification motion, right? I mean, the whole thing is just about a disqualification motion. And now you have three attorneys in Fulton County that are likely going to have to face some disciplinary action if they're lucky. They may not be facing criminal charges for perjury, but they're definitely going to be facing disciplinary action from the state bar over filing false claims in court. I mean, they're officers of the court. They're not allowed to do that. And it's one thing if your client lies to you and you file something that your client said, but you didn't realize it was false. They're talking about their own testimony about themselves, and they know it's false. And they made representations to the court which were knowingly false, and that is a supreme no-no for attorneys. It's a disbarring no-no for attorneys. And so there's all sorts of fallout that's going to happen from this.
In the text messages that came out last week between Terrence Bradley and Ashley Merchant, he seemed very willing to help her in her disqualification case against Fani Willis for a time. He was texting all sorts of detailed information. Yeah, the relationship was going on for this long. It was happening well before Nathan Wade was ever hired by Fani Willis. He was ready to share everything. And then all of a sudden, in this trial, he's, as I mentioned, he seems to have forgotten everything. At least that's how he represented it. He's like, I'm not sure. I don't remember. I can't recall is kind of what they famously say. But at one point,
Right,
at one point during the hearing, an issue was brought up. Were you threatened? Were you threatened? And he kind of disputed the idea that he was. But Ed Morrissey, do you suspect that Terrence Bradley was threatened in some way to compel his testimony here?
I'm not even sure if it was directly, but you have to remember that the context of this was he was fighting a claim of sexual assault at the law firm that he and Nathan Wade were partners at. And he ended up leaving rather than dealing with that situation. I don't know if it ever got resolved to anybody's satisfaction. And so that's kind of still hanging over the guy's head. Now, he claims he's innocent. It came up during the hearing. I think it was Ashley Merchant that brought it out to sort of defuse the issue because she knew that, Fulton County's attorneys were going to rip into him and say, well, you're just doing this, to get even, which is a possibility, right? But, yeah, I mean, that's certainly a pressure point. That could have been a pressure point. I don't know if it was, but It could have been a pressure point. But when you combine up with Cindi Lee Yeager as a testing that she will testify to, it certainly adds up to witness intimidation. And I think that's exactly what happened. And that's exactly why Terrence Bradley delivered that very bizarre performance. Was that last week? I think it was last week when he was testifying, or it may have been
it all runs together. Yeah, no,
really
that's
does,
no,
yeah.
but it has. But it actually, though, I was about to ask about the timing of this. It does feel like it's been stretching on for far too long, though. At least for me, as an armchair non-lawyer watching all of this, I'm going, they're lying. They're so obviously lying. I'm yelling at my television screen, and I'm thinking, how long does it take to disqualify her and the rest of her team from this case? It hasn't happened yet, Ed Morrissey. Will we see it soon?
I don't know. He said that he'll have a ruling within 2 weeks, right? But the problem is now that he may have to reopen the evidentiary phase of this because he may need to take this testimony. Or it might be that Judge Scott McAfee has heard enough. You know who Dave Wasserman is, right?
Yes, from the Cook Political Report.
Cook Political Report. What's his tagline whenever he's tweeting and he's about ready to call a race? What does he say?
He says, "I've seen enough."
I've seen enough. I think maybe Judge Scott McAfee is at the point of I've seen enough.
I would hope
I just
so.
need to write this.
I would hope so. So everyone's kind of been hoping if you watch the hearings, and as you have, Ed, you look and you say, okay, Judge McAfee seems like he's handling this in the kind of dispassionate, sober way you'd expect a judge to treat a case like this. But there's still, of course, sort of the lingering concerns, right? Because nowadays you're suspicious of everybody in politics, and some people have been suspicious their entire lives. But like a guy like McAfee, so McAfee at one point he worked for Fani Willis. And both of them were in a much more junior capacity, but he worked for her at one point. And he did make a donation to her campaign at one point. And you sit there and you wonder, is this guy on the up and up? Or is he under either current or just personal political pressure to rule in her favor?
Well, I think first off, I think they worked together, and he worked for her briefly. I don't think it was for very long, if I recall.
Right.
And apparently they were on friendly terms, right? Friendly enough to where he kicked in $150 to her campaign. Now, I don't really consider that a massive donation, but it's not $5 either. But I don't think that that's an indication that he's going to be biased on Willis's behalf, especially given the nonsense that unfolded in his court.
Yes.
I do think it might explain, though, why he was so what's the right word, indulgent with her when she was on the stand and allowed her to act up. And at a certain point, he finally had enough and made it clear that if she continued to act up, he was going to strike all of her testimony from the record, which actually might have done her a favor in the end. But she did. She settled down after that, and she comported herself somewhat better. But the thing is that when you've got judges like this in counties like any county, Fulton County, doesn't really matter, all these attorneys kind of come up together, right? So they all kind of know each other. It's a community of attorneys that work in courts like this. So you're never going to find 3 attorneys in that or 4 attorneys in that scenario that don't have any connection whatsoever to each other. They're all going to have had some interactions with each other. All of these are people who are active in the legal/political scene. I don't really consider that to be an issue. I think Scott McAfee's just trying to make sure that he's being seen to be bending over backwards to allow Willis to have her say in this. And then and then he'll lower the boom when it comes. Because there's no way, after watching all this unfold, that anybody's going to have confidence that Fani Willis is actually able to move forward on this. I mean, there's no concept in my mind how a judge can look at this and say, oh, no, everything's fine.
So make a prediction for us. What happens here? Does Fulton County lose this case or lose control of this case and Fani Willis is taken off of it?
I think most judges will do the minimum necessary, right? They don't really want to go over that. Some are more activist, but most judges are cautious. So I think what McAfee says is he rules that I'm not going to get into who started what when. It's very clear, though, that based on the testimony and the things that I've seen in the courtroom, that there is more than an ample appearance of impropriety going on here, and that's enough to remove Fulton County DA's office from this case. He's not going to dismiss the case. He's not going to dismiss it even without prejudice. I think he just removes Fulton County DA, refers it back. There's a prosecutor's council, I believe, in Georgia that operates in conjunction with the state bar, and he'll throw it to them and try to get it assigned to a different jurisdiction. But at that point, a different jurisdiction is going to look at this and go, this case is a loser. I mean, there are individual crimes in here that you can prosecute, but the RICO part of this is nonsense. And I think it falls apart at that point. Yeah,
it definitely does. Although, I mean, Georgia, Fulton County is not the only blue county in Georgia. You mentioned Cobb County. There are some other places that might have prosecutors who have an appetite for this, but boy, this is a very hot case and the kind of thing that doesn't have any sort of legal precedent to it whatsoever.
I've never seen anything like this, and I'm not an expert on this either, but I've never seen anything like this. But then again, the RICO case, nobody's really ever seen a RICO case like this either, where there wasn't a financial benefit at the core of it. The RICO cases are usually the RICO predicate is used to deal with massive amounts of financial benefits that are being manipulated illegally, for other purposes as well, organized crime. So there's all sorts of different things, but there's a financial benefit at the center of it. There's no financial benefit, and there's no organization, right? This was sort of an ad hoc collection of people that were challenging an election for a period of time that lasted 2-3 months. That's not an organization. So it's a really unusual case, and again, I think that if this lands in almost any other jurisdiction, they look at this and go, no, this is not going to fly. I can't make this work.
All right, we'll see what happens. Ed Morrissey, thank you as always for your insights and your excellent work over at Hot Air, sir. Nice to talk to you today. The President of the United States will be delivering the State of the Union this Thursday evening. I will be enjoying steak and bourbon at Bourbon Boulevard alongside so many great WMAL friends. The Stake of the Union. We're going to have a great time. And the White House has just released a photo of Joe Biden's stunt double holding a copy of the State of the Union, a draft copy. It says draft 348 a.m. What? 348 a.m.? What does this even mean? So presumably the first part of it is March 4th. I don't know what 8 a.m., 12:45 p.m., camp prep. Anyway, it's the title on this thing is weird. But if you look at the page, it's got his script, and all it says is, "Good evening, my fellow Americans, Mr. Speaker, Madam Vice President, members of Congress and the Cabinet, military leaders, distinguished guests." And that's it. That's literally the whole first page. Just to give you a sense here, I'm just taking a wild stab at this. I think the font is like size 32. It's huge. It is huge. The whole first page is just 6 lines of various people he's saying hello to. How long is this speech going to be? How long? So anyway, they're struggling just to get him to practice reading things like that ahead of the State of the Union. What will he discuss? What will come up at that State of the Union? Will, for instance, he mention, say, Laken Riley? Peter Doocy had that question today.
Will President Biden publicly address Laken Riley's murder, allegedly at the hands of an illegal immigrant who was released by law enforcement multiple times on Thursday night? I know he's got a statement, but what about at the State of the Union?
Okay, 10 brownie points if you get the answer to this right. What is the answer to this? Will he address Laken Riley at the State of the Union? You can either accept your brownie points at the conclusion of the speech or right after this answer from Karinge.
I do want, this is such a tragic story and obviously situation.
Remember when she was lamenting the death of American troops overseas? She said, they died serving our administration. You remember that? She's terrible at this.
Statement, but what about at the State of the Union?
Look, I do want, this is such a tragic story and obviously situation. This is someone's life that was lost, so I do want to always acknowledge and extend our deepest condolences to her family and to her friends and the people who loved her.
Who are you talking about? Can you say her name? Do you mind? Would you just say the name Laken Riley? We just want to see if you can say it.
And so want to always be sure to say that, and because it's so tragic.
Is it?
Look, I don't have any...
Then why do you keep repeating it? Why does that event keep repeating itself? If Laken Riley is a symbol of all of the devastation that has been wrought upon our country, Laken Riley is something we can all get our arms around. We can get our minds around. We can think about it. We can see the pictures of her. We think of a young girl running, a nursing student, so much promise ahead of her, running at the University of Georgia, attacked, killed by an illegal immigrant in the United States, released by the Biden administration. And you stand up there and you say your condolences are with her. Will Biden mention her?
Look, I don't have anything to share about the president's speech as it relates to that particular question that you have. But we want to always be sure that we lift up the families who have lost their loved ones in that way.
Well, then spare us the nonsense and just say no. Next question. Hold tight. I've got more for you ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hey, good afternoon to you. 5:35 early now. 5:35 now on WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. We had a Democrat caller earlier who apparently he thinks the most important feature about any politician is their genitalia. He suggested that he would vote for Nikki Haley because she's a woman. It's time for a woman to be president, he says. I said, why is that important? He didn't have an answer. He must be sad today to hear that Kyrsten Sinema, who, by the way, for his benefit, she's openly bisexual, too. She's announcing she's retiring from the Senate at the end of the year. Here she is online today.
Compromise is a dirty word. We've arrived at that crossroad, and we chose anger and division. I believe in my approach, but it's not what America wants right now. I love Arizona, and I am so proud of what we've delivered. Because I choose civility, understanding, listening, working together to get stuff done, I will leave the Senate at the end of this year.
Yeah. Perhaps it's for the best. Boy, what was the last thing that she, quote, compromised on? What was the civility she was engaged in? Oh, that's right. That disgusting amnesty package. That was her and Chris Murphy and James Lankford. They orchestrated this grotesque amnesty package to allow foreign nationals to pour into our country through a shell game, and then they wanted to call it border security. So it might be for the best. Kyrsten Sinema exiting at the end of this year, she says. The breaking news today on that subject. Back to Biden now for a moment. The White House press conference today. A reporter asked Karine Jean-Pierre, Karinge, why it is that Joe Biden needs note cards for everything. Why does Joe Biden need notes to tell him his own opinions? Right? When he gets, why does he need, you've seen the little cards. Sometimes there's close-up photos of this. Why does Biden need a note card that tells him which reporter to call on, what their question is going to be, how to pronounce their name, what his answer to the question that he already has in front of him should be? Why does he need note cards for this? We saw some reporting recently that Biden brings note cards to donor events. So when he meets with donors trying to get some more money out of them to keep him in power, he has to bring note cards with him so he can inform them of his opinions as written on the note cards. This is, if you're looking for more evidence of Obama's earpiece presidency, it might be a note card presidency. That might be what this is. But somebody's writing answers for him, and he has to rely on the note cards to answer. That's the way it works. In fact, Kevin McCarthy, the former Speaker of the House, the Republican, he said recently that in all the meetings he was in with Joe Biden, he always had note cards with him, again, to give him his own opinions to then express to the people he was speaking with. So a reporter finally gets around to asking this today. and says, hey, wait a second. I noticed Joe Biden had note cards at the border last week. And then again on Friday, he had note cards when he was engaging with anyone. Why is Biden relying on note cards to be president of the United States? President note card. Here's what Karinge had to say. She wasn't happy with this question.
One more, if I may. The president, I noticed, had note cards at the border when he was doing his briefing there. He also had note cards last Friday with the Italian prime minister. Why does the president rely so heavily on note cards?
You're upset because the president has note cards?
Notice the childlike response she instantly injects into this. He didn't say he was upset. In fact, his tone sounds relatively sober. He's asking, why does the president rely on note cards? He asks a very simple question. There's no hysterics in his voice, no emotion in the way he's asking it. He's just curious, like the rest of us, why the president seems incapable of communicating on his own. Why does he need the assistance of notes? And she responds like a child.
Briefing there. He also had note cards last Friday with the Italian prime minister. Why does the president rely so heavily on note cards?
You're upset because the president has note cards? You're asking me a question about the president having note cards?
I'm asking why
The
does he rely
president who
so
has
heavily?
had probably one of the most successful first 3 years of...
I know that she can tell us she's lying too. She injected probably in there just to hedge. Probably one of the most successful first 3 years of any president ever.
Having note cards?
I'm asking why
The
does he rely
president who
so
has
heavily?
had probably one of the most successful first 3 years of an administration than any modern day president. He's done more in the first 3 years.
Oh my gosh, do you hear how frazzled she is? She's trying more. She's like Porky Pig ending a cartoon.
President who has had probably one of the most successful first 3 years of an administration than any modern day president. He's done more in the first 3 years than most presidents who had 2 terms. You're asking me about note cards?
Playoffs? You want to talk about playoffs?
Wait, I'm not speaking to you right now, James. I'm talking to your friend over here, Ed.
So this is great. So James Rosen says, why don't you just answer the question? Which James Rosen is all of us. James Rosen is the man who's just sitting in there speaking on behalf of all of us going, answer the question. He just asked you a question. Why can't you answer it instead of demeaning him and attacking him for daring to notice what the rest of us have seen? And Rosen, almost to a fault, James is like super nice when he asks these uncomfortable questions. He's like, I'm so sorry I have to ask this. But Mr. President, everyone has noticed your brain doesn't work. And again, I am so sorry I'm having to ask this question at all. But I'm asking you, your brain doesn't work. Can you please explain why you should be president of the United States given all of the signs of your obvious cognitive decline? So he asks in the nicest of possible ways. It's a tough question. So you got a little throat clearing at the beginning might help it along. And a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. And here, Karinge is like not even stomaching this. She's like lashing out like a high schooler. And James tries to settle her down because, well, why don't you just answer the question? And then she freaks out more.
Of an administration than any modern day president. He's done more in the first 3 years than most presidents who had 2 terms. You're asking me about note cards? I'm not speaking to you right now, James. I'm talking to your friend over here, Ed. So thank you so much. But thank you so much for interjecting. Go ahead, Ed.
What a child. What a complete child she is. Oh, but thank you so much. Thank you for interjecting, she says.
Why he relies so heavily on note cards.
I think what's important here and what the American people care about is how this president is delivering for them. And that's what he's doing. And that's what's the most important thing here.
Is that what it says on your note cards? Why do you rely on note cards? That follow-up question, why do you rely on note cards for everything? Why is that? Why do you not come equipped with any meaningful answers about anything? Why do you lie so much? That's what they should ask. The next question from Ed, whoever that Ed was, should be like, all right, my next question is, why do you lie all the time? Why are you constantly lying to us? Do you ever prepare for these, or do you just come out and wing it every day? Let me be clear. I wing it every single day. Robert Hur is going to testify to Congress soon. That'll be interesting. Robert Hur is the Biden administration official that says officially that Biden's brain is not working as intended. And he'll be testifying. So is the White House going to blockade the release of the transcript.
Robert Hur is supposed to testify a week from today. Has the White House made a decision on releasing the transcripts of the president's interview?
I would refer you to my colleagues at the White House counsel's office.
Oh, is that on your note card? You're going to refer him to the White House counsel's office. Okay, that's helpful. Other Biden administration officials are fanning out across the media right now to talk about how great the Biden administration is. That includes Pete Buttigieg. I didn't realize he was still in the government. Is he still officially Secretary of Transportation? He is? That guy's hilarious. Remember when he disappeared for 3 months and nobody noticed? Yeah, he was on paternity leave. He disappeared. Nobody knew. Nobody knew. It was just gone. And he's one of many. Now, his job is not as important as the Secretary of Defense. He also disappeared for some lengthy amount of time and didn't tell anybody. This is the way they operate. They don't think you're entitled to that information. Pete Buttigieg, we haven't heard from him in a very long time, but he was on CNBC today. And God bless this host, Joe Kernan. I don't watch CNBC on a routine basis, but I do see all of these clips of Joe Kernan asking obvious questions of Biden. What is his name? Joe Kernan. Oh, I have it written down the wrong way. That's my fault. Joe Kernan is his name, not Kernan. And he's on CNBC. Anyway, I'm appreciative of Mr. Kernan's questions because he just asks common sense questions. He's like, well, how can you say everything's great when all of this economic data shows people are suffering? That's basically the core of many of his interviews with these Biden officials. Today, it was about the border. Here's Joe Kernan with Pete Buttigieg.
Whole move to try to come up with something by the administration and obviously bipartisan. That didn't come until it became clear it was going to be a major campaign issue.
They're talking about that very same bill I was referencing a moment ago, which is the Kyrsten Sinema, Chris Murphy, and James Lankford package, the Mitch McConnell deal that would grant amnesty to illegals and they would call it border security. Kernan is noting, hey, wait a second. This so-called bipartisan package didn't even exist until Biden started panicking about the state of the border catching up with him in the election.
And only then did the Biden administration get interested in it. And every time I hear those talking... Hold on, let's be clear here, though. Let me finish first. But every time we hear those talking points that suddenly it was Republicans who ruined the border, that's why people get so frustrated. We know what President Biden said about inviting people in. We know that he got rid of all the things that were keeping the border closed that President Trump had put in. We know that he got rid of all those. So when you say it's not his fault,
that's literally not true. It's literally not true that he got rid of.
It's literally true. That's literally true. Here comes Pete Buttigieg. You know, he speaks 7 languages.
Did you see 7.2 separation?
Did you see 7.2 million people come in during the Trump administration? It was a trickle.
He got rid of the policy to tear children out of the arms of their parents. That's true. But it is not true. Some of the other things that have been suggested. Let's be clear. Bipartisan efforts at border reform
with why there's a
have taken place in 2015, 2006. I mean,
let's address the only rebuttal that Pete Buttigieg offered. So that's literally not true, he said. Of course, it's literally true. All of the executive actions Biden took, all of the border destruction he did it right away. Day one in office, gets rid of Remain in Mexico. They all of these things, the migrant protection protocols, all of this, they just start eradicating it as quickly as they can. On the first 100 days, they pledged no deportations. Of course, it stretched well beyond 100 days. Now we don't basically deport anybody. Very few deportations going on. Biden signaled during the campaign that he was going to make it so that people would, quote, surge the border. Those were his words from the presidential campaign, that right away he's going to have people surge the border. Now, the only thing Pete Buttigieg offered is Biden is not separating families, adults from children. Is that true? No, it's not true. In fact, that is rampant on our border right now. Family separation, family unit separation. A lot of this is fraud, by the way. You have adults who bring in children as get into America free cards. But that has been going on like crazy, so much so that the left-wing, illegal immigration advocacy organizations have been attacking the Biden administration for it. Stop imprisoning kids. That's been happening. And so even what Pete Buttigieg is saying there as a rebuttal is wrong. It's not true. It's not true at all. Biden has been doing that at a record pace. So that's a scam, a total scam. And then otherwise, to the extent that it is true, they're releasing everyone into the country. They're just aiding and abetting an invasion. Now, on this issue of the border, earlier this week, we had the Border Patrol, the former head of the Border Patrol, Raul Ortiz, say that in his capacity in doing that job, he's never even met with Biden. He's never even met with Kamala Harris. That none of them even bothered. None of these top officials bothered to meet with the Border Patrol chief. If they took the border seriously, they would meet with the Border Patrol chief. They did not do that. And so in the White House today, Karinge was asked about this. What's the deal with the Border Patrol chief not meeting with Biden or Harris? Listen to her answer, once again, nonsensical.
How is President Biden going to fix the border if he can go years without talking to the head of Border Patrol?
He was literally just with the chief of the Border Patrol, just this past Thursday in Brownsville, Texas. You all reported it. You all saw it.
She knows what he's asking. She knows. This is a rather famous clip this week of the Border Patrol chief, the former Border Patrol chief, not the current guy. The guy who's been Border Patrol chief for the last 3 years saying, no, they never met with me.
He was with the Chief Owens, I believe.
The chief, who was
doesn't even know his name,
in charge for 2 years before that, said, I've never had one conversation with the president or the vice president. How is that possible?
So one thing I will say about Chief, you're talking about Chief Ortiz.
This is Chief Ortiz.
Yeah. What is it? Can you tell me again? I'm not really familiar with any of the officials involved in protecting our border. Is it Ortiz? Is that what you said? Yeah, it's Ortiz. Peter Doocy, a guy who's not in the government, has to tell the government official.
So he was invited, I believe, to participate in the president's first trip visit to El Paso, which was back in January of 2023, and he did not attend. He was invited. He was invited. He did not attend. What I can say,
it's his fault. It's the Border Patrol chief's fault. He had his opportunity. He missed it, and we never invited him again.
Is that you saw the president with the present chief, which I think is important because we are dealing with challenges at the border because the president...
Other challenges again. Remember, it went to crisis for a minute, and now it's back to challenges. I guess as we get closer to the election, everything's going to be great. The border will be secure again in terms of the syntax here.
Make that a priority, work with the Senate in a bipartisan way to come up with a way to move forward on the border, on immigration.
To provide amnesty.
Republicans rejected it because of what
the amnesty.
Former President Donald Trump told them to do.
Because of the amnesty.
Told them to reject that
because of the amnesty
proposal. So the president is going to continue to be steadfast, focus on...
He's not steady. He's not steadfast. If you think Biden, do you think steadfast?
An issue that majority of the American people care about, which is the border.
Yes.
Let's not forget, if that policy had went into law, it would have been the toughest and the fairest bipartisan border security agreement.
Another lie.
In decades.
Yeah, just a constant stream of lies. What was it? Ortiz? Can you spell that for me? What was the name of that official? I'm not familiar. Is it Ortiz? Doesn't ring any bells. It's like... You see AOC being chased down by the anti-Israel people this week at a movie theater? Yeah, so AOC, who has spent years telling people, her activists on the left, that they need to get into the faces of elected officials and, quote, make people uncomfortable. She said the whole point of protesting is to make people uncomfortable. That was when she was backing the defund the police movement in 2020. Here she is now being chased by the very people that she encouraged in the first place.
You refuse to call it a genocide in front of everybody. I need you to understand. It's not okay that there's a genocide happening. You're not actively against it. You're lying. I'm lying? You're not. You went on TV and avoided talking about it.
This is definitely the world that Maxine Waters and company created, right? Chase Republicans down, find them, don't let them rest. Gas stations, restaurants, movie theaters, get in their faces.
Cut it, and you're going to cut this, and you're going to clip this so that it's completely out of context. I already said that it was, and y'all are just going to pretend that it wasn't over and over again. It's f***ed up, man. And you're not helping these people, and you're not helping them.
You refuse to.
You're not helping them.
AOC freaking out as she's being chased by left-wing activists through the streets. The revolution always consumes itself, doesn't it? That's what happened. Hey, tomorrow on the program, Senator Ted Cruz stops by the big show. We're going to have a big conversation with him. And we'll react to those Super Tuesday results. That's all taking place right now. Have you voted yet? If not, now's your chance, Virginia. Get out there. Polls close at 7. The great one, Mark Levin, up next here on WMAL.